Hi dancers. We're talking a little bit about reading the technique and understanding the technique if you're studying for your test, or maybe you're a student that has one of the technique books and you're using it as a study guide or as a reference. And there are sometimes things that maybe don't make sense to you, but they'll make sense if you understand how to read the technique and how they're different. So one of the questions today is about the Latin technique versus the ballroom technique in the way things are written, and I'll just stick with, again, one very small topic. I don't want to talk too much about the Latin technique because we know Donnie Burns has a new book coming out, and I don't know how much he'll keep in there of Wally Laird's technique and how much he may go with newer developments. But there are some things that don't change. It's just a matter of whether they're going to be mentioned in the technique or mentioned in a different way. So one of the things that Wally talked about was inherent turnout, and that the turnout, in order again to keep things concise, that the turnout will not be mentioned in the book, we're talking in the Latin technique, unless it's more than normal. So inherent turnout is the amount of turnout that normally we have. So if you were to look at footprints in the sand when someone's walking barefoot, you'll normally see that the footprints will have a certain amount of turnout. It's true some people will have more because they may have very tight rotators. There may be looseness in the hips. Ballet dancers are trained to be very turned out. Some people have the issue of being turned in and will walk turned in. But the normal, and we use this too in studying art, there are fairly normal proportions that we use, but everyone has something different about them. So the inherent turnout is a 16th to an 8th generally is considered to be normal, and that depends again on your own physique, and perhaps if you've had some ballet training that you may be more turned out. So the mention is made on the backward walk and on the side step that we have an inherent turnout of an 8th of a turn or a 16th. And the truth is that many of us have it in our forward walk as well. That's not addressed in the current technique. But for instance, for myself, if I try to keep my foot pointed exactly straight, I'll wobble because my turnout muscles in the back of the hips are not engaged. So we do need some, we just don't want the extreme amount that we would have in ballet. Now, my brother had a loose hip, a dysplasia in his hip, and had to wear braces when he was a kid. Those braces corrected him for a perfectly parallel foot. It's not really the normal foot, but it is for him. So for him, if he were going forward, it would be very difficult for him to turn out. So we all have those issues, and if some of your students have a problem with being turned in or having knock knees, they have a hard time achieving what we call inherent turnout. But that's the way it's mentioned. So on a checked forward walk, where we're going to check our weight, it's mentioned that we have toe turned out, because that's more turnout than normal, and it helps us to check our weight and to move out of that figure. So when you have your normal turnout when you're walking forward, don't be too concerned about it and be trying to make your foot straight, which in your body could actually be an internal rotation. But be aware that you're turned out. And so because of that, if you're stepping into the second position where your feet are apart, you're taking a side step, your toes, your feet will be facing this way and your body will be in the center. So it's very rare in the Latin that we talk about things that we talk about in ballroom, like the pointing alignment, or alignments or amounts of turn in Latin are suggestion. They're still flexible to some degree in the ballroom technique, but they're generally quite true to keeping you in balance, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So when you look in the charts, the current charts, the alignment then refers more to where the body is in the room. And in the ballroom, the alignment always refers to the feet. So I'm going to say that again, because if you're studying both techniques, if you're working toward an examination, you're trying to understand this terminology. The alignment currently in the Latin refers to where the body is in the room, because our body and our feet are normally not matching, and that's because of the turnout in the feet. Where in the ballroom we go between parallel feet and turned out feet, depending whether we're the inside of a turn or the outside of a turn. So the places where we have to keep the feet more parallel, we actually have to, again, engage the muscles in the hips to keep the legs from doing their natural inherent turnout. And that's why it's very easy on, let's say, a natural turn for the person going forward to actually twist their leg and twist the foot out and move across the knee in an unhealthy position, because we tend to turn our legs and our noses and so on in the direction that we're going to move. There is one figure that's mentioned as a pointing in the Latin. One example would be in the advanced hip twist, step 3 of the advanced hip twist for the man, where he steps behind the other foot with his toe turned out, and that pointing is made mention of in the technique. One of the reasons I wanted to talk about this, not only for clarity of understanding the technique, is I was witness to a rather heated argument between two professionals, not understanding that the ballroom technique and the Latin technique are not written exactly the same as far as what the terminology actually means. So when we have figures that progress, like for instance in the samba and in the passo doble, we have progressive figures in the Latin. So then we may be more concerned, of course, with alignments, and we're moving around the line of dance, where in the rumba and the cha-cha and the jive, we're more in a circular pattern. So we're moving in one area most of the time, unless we do a progressive figure. So we're not concerned as much with alignment. So you'll be given amounts of turn roughly as suggestions. But understand that that's a very big difference of alignment referring to the body and alignment referring to the feet. And as I said, I don't know in the new Latin technique how that will be described, but it's a good idea to understand that.